Ooh, a spicy question. I
because
love
the writing is sort of everything, right? Like you kind of can fix plot holes, but if the writing is
so some readers love that, and some readers are like, but I wanted more of this. So it's kind of a gamble.
Hello and welcome back to the Right and Wrong podcast. On today's episode, I'm joined by a broadcast journalist, a film, television and radio producer, a former book publicist, and as of July, a published author. It's Leigh Radford. Hello.
Hello. Thank you for having me on, Jamie.
Thanks so much for coming. Let's jump right in, starting with the novel, your debut novel. It's called One Yellow Eye, and it's out on the 15th of July. Tell us a little bit about what we can expect to find inside One Yellow Eye.
So it's being promoted as a horror novel, but I think at its heart, it's a love story. It's a book about how far we would go to keep the ones we love alive. We are in London 3 months after a viral epidemic that has swept through the city and decimated its population, leaving locals terrified that the virus will return. The virus has all the classic hallmarks of a zombie virus. It's spread aggressively by biting and virulently and fast. And the infected have those physical symptoms of the lumbering gait and the bloodlust, the bleeding from the eyes, etc. And locals living in London have been forced to haplessly dispatch their infected relatives and loved ones with bricks and shovels and any old kitchen implement they have to hand to support the government's extermination program. The infected have been rounded up and destroyed to stem the spread. So 3 months after the initial outbreak, as far as everybody is aware, all of the infected zombies have been rounded up and destroyed, except for one who secretly is handcuffed to the radiator in the spare bedroom of his flat, where his wife, Hester, a biomedical scientist, is working day and night and increasingly desperately to bring him back from the undead. I
see. There's a lot to unpack there. My first question was, what an interesting setting, because obviously we're all very familiar with zombie apocalypse stories, but most of those stories either take place at the start of the outbreak or sort of during the sort of zombie wasteland thing. It's cool that you're kind of picking up at the sort of like resolution of it after the zombie, what you would traditionally assume is where the story would take place with this setting. What made you think, oh, this will be an interesting time to just like pick up the story?
I think a couple of different reasons. Firstly, we needed to get to Hester at a point where she is already really stressing out, carrying the weight of this horrible secret for 3 months is making her drink excessively, making her paranoid, really freaking her out. And she's having to conceal this awful secret from friends and family and, of course, from the authorities. So we needed to reach her at a point where she's already beginning to fray, partly because I hope the reader will understand the very difficult decisions she makes thereafter in her efforts to try and cure her husband. I also felt that 3 months after something really terrible had happened, the British reaction to that would be quite specific and unique. We would probably be getting quite tired of not being able to go out, slightly infuriated by government inactivity, the inefficiency of the cleanup. So I think having it a suitable time afterwards, away from that kind of freneticism, the urgency, it's to a point where perhaps it's become a little bit commonplace. People are still in a state of shock, but they are fundamentally trying to reorder their lives, reprioritize their lives and get back to normal. And if there's one thing that Hester can't do, it's get back to normal. So we find her at a point where perhaps she is really expressly at odds with the rest of London. And that makes, I hope, for a more engaging read.
Yes. And it is sort of darkly funny as well. It's not all doom and gloom all the time.
I hope it's darkly funny. And I think it's because if anybody has been through something that is particularly challenging, the only way to live through it is to kind of make light of it and to try to see, the light at the end of the tunnel and to convince yourself it's really not an oncoming train. It is hope and positivity and that you will survive it. So I think there's a lot of gallows humor in it. And I think it is also, I hope, a marker of the kind of relationship that she has, not just with the people that she works with, but also her husband. This is the humor in it, I think, is perhaps her paying tribute to the relationship that she is losing incrementally. He is with her, but he's obviously fundamentally and profoundly changed. But the humor she tries to keep going with him, I think, is just an extension of the relationship that she's trying to preserve for as long as possible.
Well, it's a great concept. It's a great setup. It's a great pitch. I'm excited for it to come out, for everyone to read it and kind of get to experience it. I'd love to talk a bit, kind of changing pace a bit here. I'd like to get a bit more go back a bit, I guess, and talk about you and your writing. So is this the first novel that you have written, or have you been writing for a long time?
It's the second novel I've written.
Okay.
I had always harbored a desire to write, and the jobs that I've had in the past have involved writing to probably a lesser degree. When I was a journalist, writing copy and writing scripts for other people to deliver on the radio, that kind of thing. And I've always read avidly, but I honestly never felt that I had anything particularly meaningful to write about. And I struggled, I think, earlier in my life, like perhaps a lot of people do, to find my voice. And the really nice thing about writing is you can kind of come to it when you found that voice at almost any age. So I didn't actually write a full novel until after my dad died. He died at the end of 2020, and One Yellow Eye is very much inspired by my experiences of nursing him. He was diagnosed with acute myeloid leukemia, but obviously his end of life care we had to provide during the pandemic. So that heightened the stress for our family, and also the difficulty of providing any quality of life to him at a point when we were in lockdown. So I think it triggered a lot of emotions for me and things that I needed to work through and progress and process. So I wrote a first book maybe the year after he died, but I think it will probably always remain unpublished and hidden in a drawer somewhere, because I think it's probably just an outpouring of rage, really.
Yeah.
And I did sub it out to literary agents, and I not very many, but it was rejected. And historically, I think I would always have given up at that point and taken that as, okay, that's proof. You can't write. You shouldn't try to give up. Go back under a rock, that kind of thing. And I knew, this might sound melodramatic, but I think I was always worried, gosh, if you publish something, if you get bad reviews or people don't like it, how will you deal with that? And when my dad died, I realized that the absolute worst thing that could happen to me had happened. And it sort of took the pressure off. And I realized that any bad reviews would be survivable. And I had to try, because living and not trying had to be much worse than trying and failing. And it didn't, of course, I wasn't giving myself the opportunity to try and succeed. So I had another idea for a novel, which was for One Yellow Eye. And I decided that I would undertake a creative writing course for a period of months to force myself to work on a second draft and or on a second novel. And so that second book is One Yellow Eye.
Oh, okay. Was that the course you did? Was that the Faber Academy?
Yes. So Faber and Faber is obviously independent heritage publisher of great note. obviously very associated with T.S. Eliot and a lot of mid-century poets. But they published Sally Rooney. They have an amazing backlist of authors, and they run creative writing courses and have done for a number of years now under the brand Faber Academy. And I felt it would be really helpful because it would bully me into sticking to a schedule and to delivering things in a timely fashion with a deadline, because as an ex-journalist, I quite like deadlines. The worst thing for me is staring into the abyss and not having anything that I have to deliver for anyone. So I thought it would be a tentative, hopefully pleasant way of receiving some peer feedback from other writers. And it would also get me into the ritual of writing, not just to exercise my grief, but actually to write in a way that delivered a plot and produced a readable manuscript. And I don't know that you always know that you can do that, even if you feel, well, I think I can write. Actually working within the confines of a structure and a narrative arc and producing characters that make sense to people is still a bit of a new thing, certainly for me. But so the course was incredibly helpful. And at the end of the course, they produce what they call an anthology, which includes just, I think it was 1,000 words from the beginning of your novel. And they send the anthology out to literary agents who are actively looking for new clients, which, as any unpublished writer will tell you, it's hard to know who is and isn't closed to submissions as far as the literary agencies are concerned. And many of them will say they're open, but they're not, because they are inundated with new submissions. And I've learned just how invested a good literary agent will be in helping you develop your manuscript and find your voice and help you sell your book. So having that, I will say the path of least resistance. It helps you to approach people who are already warm to being approached in the first place, rather than contacting literary agents cold. No matter how much research you've tried to do about what they are interested in, if they're already expecting that submission, I think it just boosts your chances of being signed. So when the anthology went out from Faber Academy, Hayley Steed at Janklow and Nesbitt was the first agent to get in touch with, and we met pretty quickly and developed a rapport, and she signed me, and within a couple of months had sold the UK rights to Pam Macmillan. So once I'd connected with her, the rest was pretty quick. So I think when the book comes out on the 15th of July, it will be exactly 2 years since she and I met.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. Because I was going to ask, because I've spoken to a few authors who have been through the Faber, whether it be the Faber Academy or there's other writing courses that also do that, and they'll have similar sort of agent events or things at the end of them. But sometimes it's the case that they find an agent later on. So I was going to ask if that came straight from that. It's good to hear that, you know, that does happen. And I've spoken to Hayley on this podcast before. She's great. Does she? Because I know that you work in sort of film, television, radio as well. Does she exclusively work on your prose, or does she also have input on your kind of like film, television bits?
I keep her abreast of everything that I'm doing, but she works exclusively on books for me.
Okay.
And I think what is fantastic about her is that of all of the agents that I've come into contact with over the years, actually back when I was working as a journalist, and anything I've done on the fringes of the publishing industry, I wonder sometimes if it's a British thing, but you can often feel like they're politely finding ways to tell you no. And if you are low on confidence or you have crippling self-doubt about your writing abilities, it can really knock you for six. And I think the thing that I liked about Hayley immediately was she was so positive on email. She always looked for ways to say yes. She was incredibly kind, very well read, very thoughtful in her feedback. And she came across as motivated. Like, I knew that if she took me on as a client, she would work hard on my behalf. And if I wanted to kind of earn her trust as quickly as possible by meeting the deadlines that she set for me. And then, I think it's worked very well for both of us over the last couple of years. But she makes me feel like things are achievable, that things are positive. And she gives great feedback. I think she very quickly got a feel for who I was as a person, as well as how I wanted to approach writing. She also loves football, so we can talk about football. She's a West Ham fan. I'm a jaded Arsenal supporter, always the bridesmaid, which is a bit of nice light relief. But I think it's one of those things where you don't have a literary agent, you can't begin to imagine how that working relationship will pan out. And actually, I don't know what I'd do without her now, because she's such a fantastic kind of touch point for me to run ideas by. And she always manages to make me feel better about whatever it is that I'm trying to work on. So I would almost do... I would recommend the Faber Academy course to anybody if it gets them in the position that I was in, which is in front of absolutely the right kind of agent for them.
Okay, yeah. I think I've said it many times on this podcast and talking about it on my other podcast as well, the importance of the relationship between an author and an agent going sort of beyond just the logistical business side of things. Like there's much more to that relationship than just, here's some words, sell the words, we're selling the words, I'm doing the paperwork kind of thing. It's a very personal, close relationship. And
I think for a lot of writers, I had tried to educate myself about the realities of the publishing industries before I even put, pen to paper. But for a lot of people, they are coming to it cold. And the thing that your agent does, if you really listen to them, is they are kind of a gateway into acquiring quite quickly a much deeper understanding of the market, what the market wants, what it's looking for. And if you can work with your agent with that in mind, I think it makes for an easier transition from not being a writer to being a writer, because you can kind of understand a little bit better how you're going to fit in to this world that you might have dreamed of working in. But that naturally at the beginning, you're really struggling kind of to get a footing in it. So I think having an agent who can effectively serve as a friend and a guide through that while you're getting used to it is, invaluable.
Yes. And it's I don't think of it as, it's much more a partnership than, a client relationship. It's there was an agent I spoke to way back at the beginning of the podcast. I think she's no longer an agent now, but she used to describe her, in quotes, clients as like her partners in crime more than anything else. That's how she felt about that relationship.
I think that's true. And I hope it is the same for the agent. That's nice to hear an agent say it. I think when you're a writer, because so much of your work is done in isolation, having a partner in crime takes the edge off that anxious feeling that you're launching something into the ether to be judged on its own merits, and you are singularly responsible for it, and they make you feel like it's kind of a joint effort. And I think that can be quite soothing, actually. Yeah, absolutely.
We are at the point in the episode where I pack up your things and put you on a boat and ship you off to the desert island, where I will ask you, Leigh, if you were stranded on a desert island with a single book, which book do you hope that it would be?
So I've ummed and ahed over this, because I feel like most people, the books I would read on the beach are their own genre. and you
Yeah.
don't really take incredibly challenging, difficult works if you're trying to have a holiday. But since I'm stranded on this desert island, and therefore I probably need to push myself to the limits to get off it or to stay alive until rescue comes.
Mhm.
I think I would probably have to take Mrs. Dalloway by Virginia Woolf,
Okay.
because I've read it twice and I think I could read it. It's one of those books you could read once a year for the rest of your life and take something new away every single time you read it. And
Wow.
it's such a strange novel, and it's such an upsetting novel. It's very discombobulating to read because you're never quite sure whether you're having a flashback or a flash forward, and because it's this constant sort of stream of consciousness with no set chapters, and it's this extraordinary um, preamble, it feels, to getting to Mrs. Dalloway's party, but you realize that it's the journey to getting to the party, and the people attending it are the things that matters, not the event at all. So I think it's just a breathtaking book, and actually was published 100 years ago this year. So I think it
Oh,
came
there you
out
go.
in like May 1925. So um, I think it's just a novel everybody should read, and yeah, I could read it forever and never tire of it, and always learn something new on a next reading.
Wow. I mean, incredibly high praise. I think a lot of people have an annual read, they'll
Mm,
have that one book that they read annually, but most of the time, from the people I've spoken to, it's a very comfortable, easygoing, like a Jane Austen or a Dickens or something. This is much more to kind of wrap your teeth around in terms of something that you read annually. So very high praise that you would say this is a book you could read every year and take something new out of it.
yeah, I think so, and I think I I don't know if this is just me, but I think often before you get published, other people's contemporary works can feel really intimidating, because people who are getting published and you're not, or you haven't completed your manuscript, they can make it feel more daunting. And I think I've probably always taken comfort in classic novels, or because it doesn't feel quite as difficult. This is somebody's past success. This is something that if you read it, it's going to make you better as a writer. Hopefully, you have so much to learn. There are so many novels to read and not enough time to read all of them. But I think the one thing that I'm definitely focusing on doing more and more is reading more broadly, because and reading much more commercial and contemporary fiction, so that the next book that I write, whenever that comes out, is kind of singing in the same tone as everybody else. But I think it can. So I've probably avoided reading quite a lot of books over the years because they felt like other people's achievements where I wasn't getting on with writing. Whereas now I'm I hope, much better at reading for pleasure and reading to just admire other people's work. I've been reading Virginia Fato a lot recently, just coming to the end of Mrs. March, and I think she's just astounding, and I can't wait to read her next book. I mean, Victorian Psycho only came out in January, so I'm putting the pressure on her rather unfairly. But now it feels much more like a joy rather than, I don't want to read and seethe with jealousy, but I think perhaps sometimes I've been guilty of doing that. So now
Mm-hmm.
reading actually just feels like a great celebration, which is really nice.
I think I know, I've never really thought about it in those terms before, but I know exactly what you mean. And I feel the same way. Sometimes there's a safety in reading a classic, something that was, written 50 years ago plus, that you're kind of like, oh, this is brilliant. And I feel like you can let your guard down and really appreciate it. And then sometimes I'll read something that's not even like that contemporary. Like I'll read something like, I read The Watchmen by Alan Moore. And I remember sort of at the end of each chapter, there's these it's hard to explain unless you've read the novel, but the graphic novel, but almost at the end of every chapter, I'd sort of close the book, sit back, and just think, this man is a genius, and I will never attain this level of like intellect. It's impossible, and it's so intimidating. You know, as a writer, it can be like a really scary thing to be like, this person is alive and exists, and I will never be able to write like this. But I think, yeah, you're right. There's something. Yeah, I'd not thought about it. Classics feel like a safe place from that.
I think they do, and I don't know whether it's just an indicator of our education system. I'm not sure, but it's like there are a lot of books that feel like prescribed texts that you just have to read before you die, because you just have to read them before you die, and everything else is kind of gravy. But you're working at a time before the people, your contemporaries, will, of course, there will be some who will be elevated to kind of Virginia Woolf status with the passage of time, and kind of looking at other people's careers and wondering how they're managing to achieve the things that they are achieving. I mean, I would mention Olivia Blake, who just knocked me for six when she gave me a blurb for my book, and I had no idea that she was even open to doing blurbs because she's so busy. But she produces novels, each one a kind of standalone genius novels, but so rapidly, and that pace is kind of formidable and intimidating. And I think it's really hard because if you write so often in isolation, and you're reading your work in isolation, and you're reading everybody else's work in isolation, and so it kind of is a breeding ground for, I don't know, writerly neurosis, really, because you can't help but see what other people look like they're doing. And then you have to remember that, of course, in a different way, they are doing the same thing that you're doing. They're trying to churn out their books. They are seeing what other people are doing. They do have the pressures of their publishers and their readers, and the pressure to deliver and all that kind of stuff is keenly felt, I think, by everybody, even the ones who look like they just make it easy and who make the rest of us feel really intimidated. I think it's just par for the course. And once you accept that, I think you can be a little bit easier on yourself, you know, give yourself less of a hard time and actually just focus on the things that you're trying to do. One thing that I have found lovely in my very limited experiences of being a writer is how positive and open other writers have been in providing blurbs and just saying nice words to you at events and things. So again, it makes you, or it certainly made me feel less alone and like you're kind of part of a gang who all share similar concerns and tribulations and fundamentally just a love for telling stories.
Yeah. I completely agree. And the I don't know if it's like if it's always been like that, but yeah, my experience of just being in publishing events and things like that is that authors and the people around them, the agents, the editors, it's just everyone's so friendly and everyone's just excited about the next kind of great book, and they're just excited for us all, everyone to sort of rise up together as there's less sort of treading on each other's shoulders and things, which I think is great. Next up, we're going to chat a bit about process. I've also got some questions about Leigh's work in production, her production company, and the differences between publishing novels versus film, TV, radio. That will all be available in the extended episode, which you can find at patreon.com/rightandwrong.
Reading other people's work and experiencing how they do something that either you take for granted or seems completely alien to you is a real privilege, and there's always somebody who's got a better way of doing something or saying something than you have, and you can, you know, absorb it, I think. Yeah, it's a joy.
Yes. Yeah, absolutely. I mean, like you say, two different disciplines, but there's obviously parallels, and you know, you can transfer skills from one to the other and vice versa. Yeah. Great stuff. Well, thank you so much, Leigh. It's been really great chatting with you and hearing all about your kind of writing and your publishing journey, as well as a bit about your experiences in television. And fingers crossed for you and your husband. I hope that the production company and your things take off. It sounds like he has a really good thing going. for everyone listening, One Yellow Eye is out 15th of July in all the usual places, so you'll be able to get it. But thank you so much, Leigh, for coming on the podcast. It's been so nice chatting with you and meeting you.
And likewise, Jamie, thank you very much for your time, and thank you to everybody for listening.
If anyone listening wants to keep up with what Leigh is doing, you can find her website, leighradfordauthor.com. To support the podcast, like, follow and subscribe. Join the Patreon for ad-free extended episodes and check out my other podcast, The Chosen Ones and Other Tropes. Thanks again, Leigh, and thanks to everyone listening. We will catch you on the next episode. Shout out time. One of my amazing patrons, Lee Foxton, is querying their debut novel. It's a family drama, commercial fiction along the lines of Jojo Moyes and David Nichols. Fingers crossed, I am rooting for you. Good luck.